Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us on Bear Archery's Hunting 101. I am with a familiar voice, a friend of mine, Mr. Chris Parrino. Chris, how are you, man?
Pretty good. Appreciate you calling me.
Absolutely. Before we jump in, how long have you been with Bear?
I started, when I started shooting recurves back in probably 86, 87, my first couple bows were Bear bows, Bear Super Kodiaks, is what I shot, and I kind of got into building bows and built bows up until like 2006, and pretty much been shooting Bear bows since then. So from 2006 till now has pretty much been exclusively Bear bows, pretty much every model that they've kicked out, I've played with, shot. So yeah.
Which is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about different, hunting experiences with different models, and just kind of work through, what experiences you have with what models, what you appreciate and what you don't appreciate about certain models. Before we dive in, though, I do need to give a quick thank you to our friends over at Selway. Now, you might know of a good quiver over there at Selway, Chris, the Grayling quiver.
Yeah, I do know of anybody that owns a Bear bow needs to be putting a Grayling quiver on their bow.
Now, you designed that, correct?
Well, I really can't take credit for designing it. It's actually a design that, Bear had built spring arm quiver since, I want to say 60, somewhere in the mid 60s, they came out with the wire framed quiver style, and I basically took that hood and kind of redesigned I think originally it was made with a ABS plastic, and we color matched the plastic and the emblem and pretty much redesigned the hood and kind of made it with some proven parts that Selway's been around for years, and I have used Selway's quivers for pretty much since I would say the early 90s was when I got my first quiver. And I've hunted with the slide on is the version that I use. So the slide on limb mount version is the one I've used and have used it for just years. I mean, they've got several other models. I mean, they got side mount, they've got strap on, quick disconnect. There's several different models to choose from as far as mating to your limbs or attaching it to the bow. It's kind of personal preference as to what a guy wants. I've just had really good luck with the slide on, and since I'm not much of a changer, I pretty much, whatever works for me, that's kind of what I stick with. But now I've used their products for years and years, and obviously, I've said this before, the old Bear, anything that's got the Bear logo on it was always interests me, and always liked that old spring arm style quiver, that wire frame quiver. It just was a little, looked really good on the bow. It just, there was, few issues for me as far as, hunting. I wanted something that was as quiet as possible. And having used the slide on models from Selway and having real good luck with them, I just thought that was kind of the perfect way to go. So that's kind of how that all came about. But no, I'm super happy with how they turned out. We've put a lot of effort in trying to get it as close to the original, color matched and logos and everything as possible, and have been working on some other stuff, and hope to be able to bring some other, kind of some other twists to that version out here pretty soon.
That's awesome. Yeah, Selway Selway makes some incredible quivers, so even if the Grayling isn't up your alley, head over and check out all of Selway's quivers. I just got a custom Hunting 101 quiver made from Selway, and it is absolutely fantastic. So go check out Selway Archery because they make hands down the best traditional quivers you can buy. Now, Chris, I don't know how you want to dive into this. Let's talk through your hunting experiences with different models from the beginning. So you said you started off with a Super Kodiak. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, when I pretty much got into traditional archery, I think I originally started with a Kodiak Hunter, I believe, that the neighbor let me borrow, and then the first bow I purchased was a Super Kodiak, and then from there I bought the Takedown, and I mean, I've always used takedowns. I mean, if you're traveling, I mean, when I was going to out of state or flying, and if you're traveling, the takedown version is probably by far the most versatile traditional bow they've got for that aspect. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't take two bows, but I've always taken an extra set of limbs when I'm traveling and hunting, and so you can, pack it up, throw it in your pack, kind of eliminate extra baggage and stuff. I mean, the takedown version, once you take the limbs off and the handle, you can throw it in some shoot. I know back in the day, I used to just throw them in some of my hunting socks, just throw the riser and the limbs in my hunting socks and kind of wrap them up and throw them in between my clothes and off I went. But no, the takedown version, as far as packability and being able to carry an extra set of limbs is always a good option. I mean, if you're hunting out of the truck, obviously you got some of those things aren't concerned. I mean, it's as far as hauling your bow around and just a lot easier. But now, especially traveling, it seems like the airlines want to charge you for extra baggage, and it can just be when you're going hunting, you're usually get a lot of clothes and packs and additional gear than you would on a normal trip. So being able to get everything packed down and be as efficient as possible with your packing is always a benefit. Again, especially for flying, they really want to charge you for the extra baggage anymore. So
now, what has been over the years, and I know that's kind of a long span and a big question, but over the years, what's been your favorite bow?
Well, I pretty much have since when I first got, I was pretty much strictly a takedowns. That's about all I used was the takedowns. And then when they came out with the Kodiak, that remake of the 59 Kodiak, I had an original 59 from years ago. I mean, from back in the, it was original when they built them in 59. The 59 and the 60 were very, very similar, but the Kodiaks back in the 50s, all like back in the early 50s, they were like a dual shelf bow, and then the Kodiak, 57, 58, 59, 60 were they kind of morphed into a probably for me, it was one of the sweetest shooting bows Bear put out. Like, it was just a really, really nice, smooth. I like a small grip, so that longbow type grip, as far as I was concerned, was you really fit me well. And I shot the original 59 that I had. I shot really, really well. And when it came out with the remake, it was about as close as you could ever come to exactly what they were putting out in 59. So I am definitely partial to the Kodiak when it comes to, whitetail hunting. And, if I'm traveling in a truck or whatever, I will definitely take that bow with me. When you're hunting, you want to be hunting with something that you're very, very confident with and shoot well. And for me, that bow, the Kodiak, is is it for me. I'm extremely comfortable with it. I, get along with it really well, and it's always good to hit what you're aiming at too. So a lot of pluses there. And I just like as far as the feel and the packability and the shootability, it just fits me really, really well. Some guys like something a little bit heavier, and I always run a quiver on my bow. I've always hunted with quivers attached to my bow, so that adds a little bit of weight and just gives it a little bit more mass, and just works well for me. It's a 60-inch bow, which the longer the bow is, usually the smoother they are. They just feel a little bit better in your hand. But yeah, that's those are pretty much the two bows that I switch back and forth from, is be the Kodiak and the Takedown. I mean, the Takedown is there's a lot of options. I mean, I usually shoot between 55 and 60 pounds. I mean, I'm 60s, getting to be a little bit more than I want. 55 is just right, but I always tell people, for hunting, if you're shooting targets, then it's kind of a different scenario. But for hunting, you want to shoot I feel like you want to shoot as heavy a bow as you can accurately. I mean, you can be overbowed, but if you can shoot a 40-pound bow well, but can handle a 50-pound bow, then 50 pounds is probably what you need to be shooting, as far as a hunting scenario. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, again, what you're comfortable with and what you're the most accurate with is going to be a better fit. I mean, obviously, putting the arrow where you want to put it is again more important than the weight. But I think it's kind of you want the best of both worlds. You want to shoot as heavy a bow as you can comfortably and accurately, and that's where I think you should be in a hunting scenario.
Now, we kind of dove into this weight-wise the other day. Would you ever consider, so if I'm shooting, say 50 pounds, and that's what I primarily hunt with, which, I primarily whitetail hunt, and then I was, going to go on an elk hunt or a moose hunt or something, would you, train and work up to pull a heavier bow back, or would you just go with what you're comfortable with, what you've always shot with, what you can hit with, or again, do you kind of stress yourself and stretch yourself and get a heavier bow?
Well, to a certain extent, I mean, if you're shooting 50 pounds, I mean, to go up to 60, 65, those are big jumps. To go from 50, maybe working up to 55, would that be beneficial? Yeah, absolutely. Will a 50-pound bow kill elk, moose? Absolutely. I mean, they absolutely will. I mean, I think it's more, when you get into recurves, it is definitely, weight is a factor, but again, having the right arrow, I do believe that a heavier arrow is going to penetrate better than a lighter arrow. I mean, I think there's really no question about that. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're hunting with a recurve, it's a short range. It's a distance weapon. It's really not designed for long distances. So, if you're shooting a recurve, then it's, you're kind of limiting yourself to that distance. And at that distance, 50 pounds, an elk at 20, 30 yards with the right arrow set up is really no problem. But I think where you get into the weights is, most animals, a moose hide is extremely thick. A deer is obviously not as thick. I mean, an elk kind of in between, but I mean, a moose there's a lot of hide there to get through. As far as, and bears are extremely, really on the thin side. So a bear does not have thick skin, but, if you put the arrow in the in through the, getting through the ribs or getting through the skin and getting into the rib cage, that's fairly doable on most big game animals, where the weight and the arrow setup and all that, and shooting a little heavier bow, I think, comes into play is if you get into where you're trying to get through a spot that is, a little bit more mass. As far as like the shoulder blade and such like that, you can get through it, but obviously the more weight you have, the better chances you're going to have of making a shot that you get up. If you get close to a lot of bone mass or muscle mass, you can get through that. But I don't think to go to a 60, 80, 90 pound bow and say, well, I'm going to shoot through the shoulder blade, or I'm going to shoot through, some of them bones, especially on a moose or a bigger animal like there's a lot of mass there. I don't know what you could, I know guys that have shot super heavy bows and shot like solid fiberglass fish arrows and, have talked like they get good penetration, and I imagine they do. But that's a kind of an extreme setup. So I don't, to answer that question, it's kind of shot placement. The heavier your arrow is and the heavier weight you're shooting, if you get into a marginal shot in that area, then it's obviously going to help you out. But I think for most animals, a broadside or quarter and away shot, you're not really coming through, a bunch of dense bone, leg bones, shoulders, and such like that. So that's kind of the, the decision the hunter, you got to make in the field. What's my shot angle? What's everything? What am I trying to go through to get into the, the boiler room, I'd call it. But it's usually, again, the rib cage and the getting between the ribs or even breaking ribs, like that's fairly doable if you've got a bow that's shooting a fairly heavy arrow.
Now, before we go on, because we could dive in. You've hunted game all over the world, and you have in-depth experience with all these bows that you're talking about, more so than most guys could dream of. So, I'm excited to ask you all these questions and dive in and get into all of your experiences. But before we move on, quick shout out to the dudes over at Schnee's. They make some of the finest boots on planet Earth. That's all I wear, from my pack boots to my everyday wear boots to my backcountry boots. Go check out Schnee's because they have an incredible lineup of boots, and they're running a spring sale on all of their spring boots right now. So go check out Schnee's. That's SCHNEES.com. Schnees.com. Go check them out. Now, I have a question for you, Chris. What's your do you have any bad experiences with any certain bows? And I'm not asking you what bows are bad, because, I've had bad experiences with bows, and we talked about that yesterday, or whenever we talked. We talked about how bows are just, some people's going to love a bow, some people's going to hate a bow. And it doesn't make it a good bow, doesn't make it a bad bow, but that's just their preference. And so, do you have any bows that you've had any bad experience with? I
stick to, and again, you ask me a lot of these questions, and I'll, some of these questions I'm giving you totally my opinion. What you said is, what I like, somebody else may not like, or the experience I have, somebody else might, have a totally different take on it. And that's not right or wrong. Like there's not, I can give you the different pros and cons for the way I see them, but somebody else you could ask the same question to, and they'd say, oh no, I don't agree, a 56, 58 inch bow works great for me. And that's the beauty of traditional archery and all the different models. You get out there and find the one that fits you right. But to your question, I more lean towards a 58 is kind of borderline for me at my draw length. I mean, I shot a 58-inch bow for a bunch of years, and when I started shooting, bare bows in 2006, pretty much exclusively, I pretty much shoot a 60-inch bow. I would go up to a 62 if that option was available, and I can't say for sure, but I feel like that option is coming, and I'm pretty excited about that myself. But the longer the bow, the longer your draw length is, and the longer the bow is, it's just going to shoot smoother. I mean, you're not going to have as much finger pinch. I mean, the shorter the bow, the more drastic that angle is when you're, pulling it back, obviously, because it's a shorter bow. But, some guys shoot, they like a 55, a 52, 54, 56-inch bow. For me, I mean, I've shot the A handle with the #1 limbs, which puts it at a 56-inch bow. I have used that when I'm turkey hunting, because 99% of the time, not even 99, 100% of the time, if I'm turkey hunting with my bow, it's out of a blind. So a 60-inch bow in a blind, some blinds are a little tall. I mean, they made years ago, they made some blinds that were made for long bows, recurves, and guys shooting traditional archery. It was just a taller blind, which I've got a couple of them and they work well, but you still, when you get in a blind, you got to make sure that you got, room to shoot out the window and, tips. I mean, if you're on the side or, that's something you definitely have to have in your mind. So 60-inch bow works fine, but man, when I go down to a 58 or 56-inch bow for turkey hunting, it is definitely a lot nicer. I mean, as far as that aspect, you have more room. You're not, and you're not so concerned about, hitting the blind, hitting the ground, and what have you. So for turkey hunting out of a blind, I will, go to a little shorter bow, a 58-inch bow. And again, I've shot that takedown with the #1 limbs, which puts it at 56. But, it's just shoots a little different than the longer bows. So, you need to get out and practice with it, before you just switch limbs and go hunting. But I, as far as having bad experiences, I don't shoot the ultra like a 48-inch bow. I don't shoot that. I don't shoot the 56s because I know that my draw length is long enough that it's going to, not be as conducive for me to shoot. So I pretty much stay away from them. But again, if you don't have a long draw length, if you're, shooting a little lighter poundage and, depending on what you're doing, it may suit somebody just fine. I mean, Bear has made over the years, they made that 48-inch. I mean, they make some shorter bows, some 52s, and they've all got their place. I just, I just tend to stay with the takedown and the Kodiak. And the Super Kodiak I've shot the Super Kodiak. I've killed some deer with Super Kodiak. That's what I started with. It just, for me, and again, it's totally me. It's just, I just shoot the Kodiak and the takedown better. I mean, I can shoot a Super Kodiak and it's a 60-inch bow. I don't really have any issues with it. I just, for whatever reason, shoot the other bows better.
Now, you spoke about shooting out of a blind. I, down in South Texas, hopefully doesn't listen to this episode. If he does, I'll get a phone call. But down in South Texas, one of our buddies got a brand new blind, and he put it up. And how it worked out was I was going to go film for a guy in that blind, but I was going to take my recurve in case some javelinas came in. And so some javelinas came in, and I went to shoot one with my recurve, and the limb punctured a hole right in the top of that new blind, brand new blind. And so we went to work and got some black duct tape and fixed that rip in the top of that blind. But yeah, I learned shooting a recurve out of a blind is no easy task.
Well, a blind also gives you a lot of times if you're in a blind, your depth perception will change. Like if you're, 20 yards in a blind can look to me looks a lot farther. I mean, it's just I don't know whether it's looking out the windows or what. And I think it depends. I mean, when I'm turkey hunting, I want one window open, and I try to keep it as black and dark as possible. So I don't use the blinds that have the mesh. I try to keep cut down on as much light as possible. But your perception inside the blind is different than out of a tree stand or just standing outside and shooting. Like your depth perception gets a little bit distorted in my view, or at least it does for me. So that's what I've found. And you definitely need to practice out of a blind. I mean, if you're going to go turkey hunting or you're going to go shoot out of them, it's good to get in a blind and do some practicing and just kind of, get a feel for what you're doing. But, that kind of comes back to it's tough enough to shoot a recurve in a blind with one person, let alone with two. I don't. I've done it before. I've tried it before, and I learned a long time ago that it wasn't really conducive for me. So I stay in the blind by myself. That way, I got all the room to. When you're shooting out of a blind for turkeys, and that's really all I have. I've shot antelope out of a blind, and I've shot. Again, that's all I do is turkey hunt out of a blind as far as my turkey hunting. But a lot of times I will try to, you get the window open and wherever you think the shot's going to be. And I don't usually draw in the window. I usually will draw out of the window. And then once I come to full draw, kind of lean into the window or dip back into the window, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't stick my bow hand up right at because when those turkeys get in there, a blind is definitely will conceal you, but the turkeys I'm hunting around here, they're not stupid. They just because you're in a blind don't mean they can't look in the window and see something. If they see some movement or what have you, then, it's usually not worked out good for me. So, but if you have a window open and you can keep yourself and your bow and all the movement away from that window and you draw, man, it's no problem. The turkeys can literally be right outside the window. I've put some holes in some of my blinds, but I've had a couple turkeys that will get soaked. I put my decoys very, very close to my blind. Like I will put a decoy out, and I have a decoy that is it's a hen. It's like a feeding hen. So that feeding hen, I will keep literally like 5 feet from my blind, if that. And what I do is I'll run a string underneath that blind because I'm not a great caller. I can call, but I do not claim to be any type of turkey hunter. But I have found that movement on those decoys sometimes can be better than calling to them. Like I've had turkeys come out. They come out in the field. They see the decoys, and you can tell that they acknowledge that they're there. And sometimes, just by the movement of that feeding hen is enough to get them to, get them curious enough that they will come over and get right in the decoys. But I've had one turkey that has come over and got right up next to the blind, to where when it was strutting, it was actually brushing against the blind. And I actually shot that turkey right through the blind. Like I knew where the turkey was, and it was brushed right up next, like it was just right next to the sidewall. And I just shot right through the wall, right through the turkey. That's
awesome.
That was a patchable hole that I didn't mind patching, but yeah, that's the turkey hunting out of a blind is with a bow, I think is I hear guys that sit and do it without a blind, and I'm totally amazed because I cannot. Like I have called several turkeys in with buddies of mine that are, gun hunting and this, that, and the other. And man, I to get drawn on a turkey. I don't understand how they do it. Like, it's so much movement. I mean, moving a shotgun, or even, I guess if you can get a compound, get the bow drawn when a turkey's behind a tree and you can hold it long enough, it comes out. I think that's probably all totally doable. But once I draw, I'm pretty much committed to shoot. Like, I can't draw and hold for any length of time. Like, once I start drawing, I need to be shooting fairly quick. So, and that's usually when the turkey's, 10, 15 feet from me, right there. And man, they might not have a lot of senses, but man, they see something that's just not kosher to them. It's over where I hunt, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I don't even know that you can count how many big game animals you've killed. What, out of all the big game animals you've harvested, what would you say that your favorite or best trophy is? And there is a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have for sure been fortunate enough to do a lot of hunting, and I don't claim to be any kind of. I'm not a target shooter. That's not my thing. I love to hunt with a recurve bow. So, I like I like being out there. I like hunting. I'm not, here in Illinois, we can shoot 2 bucks, and, I say unlimited does. I mean, they don't limit us on the doe tags. I mean, you just got to keep buying tags, but I don't, like, I'll try to fill my first buck tag, and I'm very, very selective on the second one, because I just don't want to be over. But I probably strayed off of what your question was, but I guess to answer that, I don't know as if the animals that I've hunted the hardest. I mean, I've shot some really good animals that were just, if you hunt long enough, you're going to have hunts that are just kind of everything, the stars align and everything lines up and everything goes your way. But the animals that have been the hardest or have taken the longest probably are the most, the most memorable for me, myself. I mean, I've shot some really good bucks that, quite honestly, I was in a good spot at the right time, and, hunting a travel thoroughfare, during the rut, and, a nice deer comes by, you shoot it. Well, that's great. And I don't, I mean, everything was, I enjoyed it. I liked it. But as far as gratification, I've had several deer that I've shot that I've seen, had seen on multiple occasions. Some of them I it had within distance and not gotten the shot for whatever reason. And, when you're hunting a certain specific animal and then finally take it, for a personal view, it's just more meaningful. Like, if you put it on the wall, everybody's going to look at the one that's got the biggest horns or the biggest racks. But I think the animals that were tough, and elk were tough for me for years. I went a bunch of years chasing elk, and it just was I killed a cow. The first year I ever went elk hunting, I killed a cow. But after that, like, I wanted a bull elk, and the worst, like, that was the one animal I really wanted. And I know I spent a bunch of years hunting elk. I say a bunch of years. I mean, there was years I'd go to Colorado, I'd hunt for a week or two, and, I might come home and go back out and hunt a little bit more if the season was in. But I think I hunted for maybe 4 years, and I want to say I did at least 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks a year. I spent out there, chasing elk. And when I finally shot, I shot like a 4x5 bull. I remember that was pretty memorable to me.
What bow was that with?
Well, that was pre-bear, so that would have been with a bow that I built, and that definitely added a a little more to the story, on a personal level. But I've shot 5 grizzly bears, and 3 of them have been with bare bows. I will tell you, the first grizzly bear that I shot with a bear takedown was pretty memorable. I mean, I had shot a couple before that with my bows, but going on that hunt and hunting with the bear, I was with a bear takedown, which was pretty much the bow that Fred Bear had designed. And
now, didn't you just get your new mag riser?
I did. Yeah, I did. I actually was shooting it today. Actually,
what color did you go with?
Well, I've got the camo right now that I've been shooting. So
that's a cool stinking camo right there, man.
Well, I had seen that. I knew they were. Or I had seen the design on that, and while they were working on it, and you're right, that is definitely we had been working on trying to get some quivers that we were going to dip with that camo, and it definitely is a very unique, kind of a. It's sweet. It is definitely a nice design. It kind of merges everything together. But
now, before I let you go, I got 2 questions for you. Fred Bear was big on his field notes. So share one note you've taken over the years with us on how to be a better sportsman, a better outdoorsman, so we can take and put it in our back pocket.
Well, I think, and maybe some of this comes with age. When I was younger, the things now that I look at, I think as you get older and you hunt more and, you get opportunities to do more, maybe your perspective changes on a lot of things. But when there was a time I'd read all the Fred Bear field notes and watch the old Fred Bear videos, and, you'd watch that and you just dream about being out there and doing the same thing. And it was kind of all about the end game, getting, it's like you'd see Fred Bear and then you'd see the animals, and that's kind of what what you would relate to. And I think the older I get, the more I think the process or the adventure, like there's a lot more to it than, everybody wants to go hunting and punch tags, and I do too. I'm hunting to fill a tag, or, that's my goal. But I have found that the older I get, I think just being out there and kind of, getting an adventure planned and then finally going on it. And again, I think the harder a guy hunts, you're probably going to, make your own luck, or you'll be successful if you spend enough time in the woods and you hunt hard enough. I think a person can absolutely be successful at it. But I think that's probably the one thing that I always kind of admire. When I'd read the Fred Bear's field notes, when I watched the videos and stuff, it just seemed like whatever Fred Bear was doing, he had a way of, kind of drawing you in, making you want to do that, and it seemed like he was having fun at every freaking turn. It's like everything, no matter what he was doing, it was just a good time and a good adventure. So I guess I would say maybe the adventure, getting out there hunting and doing that and just kind of enjoying what it's really all about. I guess would be my take on it. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to circle back. I told you I got 2 more questions. I lied. I want to circle back to the elk. You said you tried for 4 years. Did the thought ever cross your mind, if I just picked up a rifle or if I just picked up a compound?
That thought never crossed my mind. I never. Good. I don't. I may be an odd duck. I may have a different view on. And again, there's nothing wrong with. There's nothing wrong with rifle hunting. There's nothing wrong with shooting a compound. If it's legal, and there's a season for it, man, by all means, it's a person's choice. Some people just don't get as much time as other. some people have a limited time to hunt. I mean, it's just the fact. I mean, with jobs and kids and just life, there's a lot of guys that don't get as much time. I have probably over the years got a lot more time than most, and I'm extremely bullheaded. Like I don't, for me to shoot I mean, I'm not going to tell you that the thought never crossed my mind. Like there was probably times I'm like, man, I could make this a lot easier on myself. But at the end of the day, once I did, well, when I got my first bull with a bow, or with my bow, I was, it was all, at that point, it was all worth it. It's like, okay, the weight was worth it. And I, just because it took me that long to get one, I had a lot of, like, I was close to elk. I mean, there was a lot of opportunities that I had that were, man, oh, so close. Like it's, if I went 5 years hunting elk and never saw an elk, probably would have a different view on it, but I didn't. I mean, I would get, I'd get, 60, 70, 40, I'd get kind of within distance. I mean, within, I'd get within the distance where I could, take the shot, or I got shots, at 20, 30 yards, I got that close. And I mean, I'd get within 50, 60, 70 yards. That's not my shooting range, but I mean, I got close enough to elk that I felt like it's like I can do this. So I had the confidence that I could get in there and get a shot and pull it all off. But again, it took long enough for me to actually do it. And once I did it, I want to say I shot an elk, and it was kind of funny because I believe I shot an elk, and I actually shot 2 elk that year. So I shot my first elk ever in Colorado, and then turned around like 2 weeks later and went up and was hunting up in Wyoming, and I killed a bull up there too. So I mean, it's like I went for a good long while really, really struggling with elk, and then all of a sudden in 1 year, I shot 2 of them. And I mean, and I've had, again, if you're having opportunities and you're out there, then the chances are you're going to get it pulled off. So you just have to decide what if that's what you want, then you just keep driving at it, and I believe it will eventually happen.
Now, the reason I asked you that was because throughout my process of trying to become a stick bow hunter or a trad bow hunter, I've had several guys tell me different things, and you have to get your mind off of the idea, well, if I just had my compound. Why? Because you don't have your compound, and that will haunt you. That will cripple you if you constantly think, if I just have my compound. Because what'll happen is then you'll pick up your compound and start hunting, and a deer will be at 200, and you'll think, well, if I just have my rifle. And so you've got to not think in terms of, if I only just had this, but instead, like you said, take those times and learn, how can I get closer to that animal? How can I cut the distance from 60 to 20 so I can shoot it with my recurve? So that's why I asked, and I was almost positive you had never had that thought, but I just wanted to check with you. Now, before I do let you go, man, I absolutely love eating wild game, and I'm a huge proponent of it. So I've started a new little segment, and that's cooking 101. And this is brought to you by my friends over at Rebel 6 Seasonings. For a man who hunts all over the world and kills all different kind of animals, they have seasonings for all of your animals, specifically tailored to the taste of that meat. So they've got bear seasonings, they've got fish seasonings, they've got deer seasonings and elk seasonings, and it's all tailored to the taste of that wild game, not to cover up the taste of wild game, but to accent the taste of wild game. So give me your cooking 101 tip, or your, if you've had a favorite meal in the backcountry, if you've got, your favorite kind of wild game to harvest or to eat, anything cooking related, man, because I'm about to go right now and have some venison tacos. I absolutely love wild game. So share with me anything you got on cooking.
Well, I really wouldn't consider myself Martha Stewart or anything, but I would say that to, the biggest key for whitetail or for most game meat is not overcooking it. Like if you have to have it well done or medium, medium. I mean, you just there's a point I think when you're cooking wild meat, you can have all the seasoning, you can have anything and everything you have on it, but if you just cook the good right out of it, it just ruins it. I personally have found that I will marinate meat up in different marinades, and again, some of those marinades, you can sit that meat in there for a couple 2 or 3 days, and then I think the key is to cook it really, really hot, really fast, and not overcook it. Like you pretty much. I mean, I like for my meat to be warm and red in the middle. So I mean, I lean towards warm rare to medium rare. Like I just don't think that whenever I overcook it or whenever I cook it to where it's there's no red left in it, it doesn't seem the same. So I guess the biggest thing that I see is not overcooking it. So I cook deer steaks and stuff hot and fast. And
I had a guy tell me one time, you'll like this, Chris. I had a guy tell me one time, they said, if you overcook a ribeye to well done, toss it out to your dog. If you overcook a deer steak to well done, don't give it to your dog. Your dog's better than that. Throw it out to the coyotes.
Well, I think it's got to do with most game meat is just so lean and pure that there's no fat in it. It's just extremely lean, and you can just cook it too much. To your point, years ago I hunted up in I was up in Quebec on a caribou hunt, and some of the guys that were in the camp were had owned restaurants up in Detroit, so they were all 5-star chefs and these culinary experts, and I can remember those guys cooking up there. When I was young, I mean, I probably wasn't even 20 when I was up there doing this, but man, I remember them cooking some caribou steaks and stuff, and they were, had their pots and pans and olive oil and whatever they're throwing on it, and they cook it up and saute these caribou steaks up, and they were extremely good, but I do remember them cooking it up and giving it to me, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, man, I think you need to cook that a little more. Like it was not done enough for me to eat it at that time, and the guys were super good, and these guys are chefs. I mean, these guys they knew more about cooking than I'll ever know. And they started explaining to me it's like, hey, here's, when you cook, you basically on the outside of the meat, you kind of burn off all the bacteria, and meat's either good or it's bad. And if it's bad, you know it, like you can smell it, like it. And that's why hamburger, I mean, obviously hamburger, you want to cook through and through because it's been ground up. But as far as, ribeye, T-bone steak, I mean, any kind of steak, when, if you cook the outsides of that, you have cooked off pretty much any bacteria, and there's really no need to take the middle of that hasn't been exposed to the air to a point that it's just cooked to death. And since then, I've pretty much, I ate it. It was super good, like what they were doing. It's like, once I got my mind past some of that, and I've eaten that way ever since, and I've never gotten sick. I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend that on, pork or anything else. I mean, there's certain animals that you definitely want to cook through and through, but
bear.
I mean, you want to get them, get bear and pigs and hogs and I would say turkey or any kind of, birds or anything like that. You want to get it cooked, get it cooked clean through. But when it comes to deer steak, venison steaks, I just I just don't, I mean, I don't. And it's much better. I mean, it definitely tastes better.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
I think marinating it up is definitely a key. Like if you can, I mean, I've marinated stuff and, pour a can of Blue Moon beer in there and a bottle of Worcestershire sauce. I mean, you can marinate with some of the simplest stuff. And if you let it go long enough, man, it's dynamite. I mean, it's really, really good, but.
Yeah, you told me you're not Martha Stewart, but man, you went off and you talk a lot about wild game. That's because me and you both like to eat.
I like to. I mean, the eating is a good part of it, but I definitely, I think you keep it simple and don't overcook it. There's really nothing. I don't think you can go wrong, and there's probably a lot of options as far as, what you cook with or what you use, but. It's again, the not overcooking it, I guess, would be the secret there.
Yeah. Well, guys, before you go, I need you to head over and check out on Facebook and Instagram the 363 Hunt Club. This is a nonprofit organization, the John V. Mesh Memorial Scholarship. What happened was John Mesh was a firefighter in the Kansas City area. He died in the line of duty. He had a strong passion for getting kids involved in the outdoors. So at his passing, his brother decided to honor him by starting a nonprofit organization to get kids involved in the outdoors. And they hold these big events. One of them is at our friends, the E3 Ranch there, and they hold these big events and they raise money, and they will send a student through school who wants to get their job in the outdoor industry. So a game warden or something like that, they will give a scholarship to that student in order to go and work in the outdoor industry. So go check out 363 Hunt Club on social media and the John V. Mesh Memorial Scholarship. Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. I cannot thank you enough. It's always a pleasure talking with you. It's always a pleasure hearing you tell stories. And so I appreciate you coming on, man.
I appreciate you having me on.
Guys, thank you for listening, and you guys have a great week.